Hello guys, welcome to a new video at Fischer series. Today we have a really interesting game. Mikhail Tal against Bobby Fischer, the greatest chess rivalry during that time. The Messi, Ronaldo, Magnus, Hikaru. I mean, it doesn't really get better than this. And in this game we actually see a triple knight fork, engine-like precision move. So I can't wait to show you. Let's just dive straight into the game. Tal has the white pieces, Fischer is with black, and Tal starts with d4. So usually he plays e4, but maybe against Fischer he wants to play d4 and another setup, because Fischer plays the King's Indian defense a lot. After knight f6, c4, g6, we're now in the King's Indian defense, knight c3, bishop g7 and e4. So we give white the whole center, but later on we will attack the center with our pawns. So now d6, and now it branches out for Tal. He can play the accelerated Averbach, he can play the standard development, the Samish, the Maganarov. I mean, there's a lot possible here, but Tal decides to play the standard normal way of development. Now we have castles, knight to f3, so only one move left to castle on the king side as well. And now Fischer can either go for e5 or c5 to break open the center. Fischer decides to play e5, but Tal doesn't want the center to get opened up. He plays d5. And when the center is locked like this, a good rule of thumb is to open up the center with our pawns to the side our pawn chain is facing. So if you look at our pawn chain, the top of the pawn chain is actually facing the king side. So it's better to open up on f5 than on c6, because if you play c6, pawn takes, then this pawn becomes really weak and backwards actually, since we control the d5 square 2 times. So it's better to play f5 here. And Tal, after castling and moving his knight to d2 and f3, his pawn chain would be looking towards the queen side. So usually in the King's Indian defense, black attacks on the king side and white attacks on the queen side. So okay, Fischer first plays knight b to d7, since this c5 square is really weak now, after pushing d4. Okay, now Tal goes for bishop g5. He first wants to pin this knight, since you want to push f5 as black, and by pinning the knight we're temporarily blocking that idea. h6, bishop h4, and okay, we can play g5 and kick the bishop again, but after pushing f5 then we cannot take back with the g-pawn then anymore. So Fischer doesn't want that. He doesn't push the g-pawn. He actually plays a6 to prevent the knight coming to b5. Okay, now we have knight to d2. So with knight to d2 we want to push to f3, have this really nice pawn chain, and by pushing f3 we make a loft for the bishop to get on f2 and have a lot of pressure on those dark squares. So now Fischer plays queen to e8 to get out of this pin. Tal castles, and now we have knight to h7 by Fischer. So okay, since he is not pinned anymore, he can move his knight, and he really wants to push f5 later on. And Tal's like, okay, let me expand on the queen side then, b4. Knight to g5 by Fischer, and it looks like we can just take and double your pawns here, right? But after knight to f3 attacking this pawn, we can actually play g4, knight has to go back, and then f5. So we cannot even take this pawn. And if you take, we have this really nice pawn chain towards the king side, and it looks like our king is weak, but we can just bring the queen, the knight to f6, the bishop is looking towards the king side. It's just a fine position. So if you decide to give up your bishop pair, you should do it for a good reason. And here it doesn't really have a clear purpose to just give away your bishop pair. So Tal goes for his idea f3. Now f5, bishop f2, and queen to e7. Now we have a rook to c1 defending the knight, since, for example, if Tal had taken the pawn, then we can push e4 and we're actually attacking this knight, which is undefended. So that's why later on Tal plays a rook to c1 in this position to defend his c3 knight. Now we have knight to f6, so Fischer's pieces are slowly coming towards the king side. And now c5, Tal strikes on the queen side. But Fischer doesn't really mind. He's obviously not going to take, because then after takes, just look at this. This is terrible. So he just develops his bishop to d7, and you cannot push either, then you're just losing a pawn for nothing. So here Tal decides to develop his queen as well. And now knight to h5. So the pieces are slowly getting towards the king side here. And now b5. So Tal is really putting some pressure on the queen side. But Fischer is the first to strike on the king side. He plays f takes e4. Now we have knight takes e4, knight takes e4, and f takes e4. And now knight to f4. So you can see the purpose of knight f6 to h5 to f4 was to rotate the knight and have it on a better square, attacking the king side. So now we have c6. This looks really dangerous, like we can maybe create a passer here. But Fischer first plays queen to g5, threatening checkmate. You have to defend with the bishop. And now after b takes, we have a really interesting moment in the game. Here Tal is +1 according to the engine. Well, why is he +1? If you take back, you actually lose your advantage. Well, how do we keep the advantage then? Well, here, after playing h4, we're kicking away the queen. Queen has to move. And now after d takes, bishop to e6, we can push b6. And now we will create a passer, because if you take, we take back with the bishop, and this pawn is a passed pawn. Well, what is the difference then? What if we had not played h4? Well, after takes, bishop now to g4, which was not possible if we had played h4. Bishop takes, queen takes, threatening checkmate again. We have to defend checkmate, and now we can actually take the b pawn. So we just win time, and with h4 you would have won some tempo. So that's the little difference which would have made Tal get a little advantage. After a takes b5, we have bishop takes f4, and here you have two decisions as well, either taking with the rook or with the pawn. But if you take with the rook, this bishop is really trapped in its own pawn chain. It's doing nothing, it's just another pawn right now. So Fischer here takes with the pawn, which is the better move, because now we're activating our bishop. And now Tal decides to take the pawn. And here Fischer makes an interesting decision. He actually has two good moves here. The first really good move is f3, undermining this pawn. Now we would have rook to f2, rook to b8, attacking the knight. Knight takes c7, rook to b2. You can see it's defended. That's why we had to take with the e pawn earlier on. But now we have a really nice move. Queen to c4 check, king to h8, and now you have to play g3. And after rook takes, king takes, we have some ideas of coming in like this. So this is a really complex position. And that's why f3 is such a good move. But here Fischer plays rook to f7. He decides to defend his c pawn like this. But the problem here is that after queen to c4, you're actually not defending this pawn, because your rook is pinned. Your rook's doing nothing here. So Fischer now has to play rook to c8, and look at how passive this rook now is. It's a really terrible rook here. And Tal actually saw this f3 push, so he plays rook to f3 himself. So now the pawn cannot be pushed anymore, and the attack is over for Fischer. He doesn't have much here. So he plays bishop to e5, defending his pawn. Now rook c to f1. And now king to g7. So we want to get out of the pin, so this rook is useful now again. And now Tal's like, okay, my position is fine. I have a passer here. Let me play a4. And Fischer's like, okay, I'm defending the c7 pawn with my f7 rook. Let me attack your pawn. And now Tal has a really nice position. I mean, Fischer's position looks really, honestly, really bad. His queen cannot do much. The bishop is really trapped here. The rook is forced to defend his own pawn. This rook is not doing much. So Tal can slowly improve his position here. And he first starts doing so by playing king to h1, which is a really, really amazing move. I mean, that's just really nice, because after pushing the g pawn, if you take the f pawn, there would not be a check anymore. Also, this bishop cannot give a check later on in the game. So king to h1 is a really amazing move here. And now Fischer is in a lot of trouble. I mean, the engine says it's equal here, but from a human perspective, it's really hard to find a move here. I mean, what can you do? Fischer played queen to g5 here, which is actually not a good move. Here he should have played g5, and after g3 bring the queen back to h5 to defend his rook. Because after takes, rook g1 check, king to h7, we are defending our own rook. And the engine says it's still equal. This is just an equal position. But after queen to g5, which Fischer played, now we have g3 again. And the problem here is that those pawns are doing nothing. You really needed the g pawn to defend your f pawn. You cannot take, because then we're triple attacking this rook and it just leads to mate. So Fischer here is in a lot of trouble. He plays rook a to fa to defend this pawn with another piece. But now g takes f4 anyway, and here, well, Fischer makes a terrible mistake. Here he should have played queen to g4 to keep the game going. Okay, it's still a worse position, but still we could play on here. After h3, queen to h4, now knight takes c7, rook takes, pawn takes, rook takes, and now we can give some checks, but the king will eventually escape and we will win the e4 pawn. But white's a pawn up here and the game goes on. But here Fischer played bishop takes f4. And that's actually the losing move. It's just a losing move on the spot, because here Tal has an amazing move, knight to d4. And after knight to d4, you can see the knight is coming in with this amazing fork. I mean, that's really terrible. So Fischer plays queen to h4, since he cannot prevent the knight coming in, or he has to give away his rook. Now rook takes f4, rook takes f4, and knight to e6 with this triple fork. I mean, that's brilliant. And well, there are only 3 king moves here. If you play king to h8, then we take with a discovered check, so that's just loses. If you play king to h7, then we take this rook with a check, and if you take back the knight, we will take your rook and you're just a piece down. So you have to play king to h8. But now we only have 1 move to win the game. If you decide to take either one of those rooks, it's actually equal. This is just equal game and it will end in a draw. But here Tal plays queen d4 check. You have to defend with the rook, but this rook is pinned now. So now we do take the f4 rook. You cannot take it, and if you take with the queen, well, you're just losing the queen. So now you're a piece down. And well, after takes, king to h7, getting out of the pin. Now we have e5, and we're defending the knight twice again. We're a piece up, and after d takes e5, Tal plays queen d7, check, and Fischer resigned the game because there's simply nothing you can do. We will pick this pawn, we will advance the c6 pawn, we can even take the e5 pawn, and well, if you move the king and we do something like this, you cannot even defend it. Your queen would be hanging. So this is just a terrible position. We will just pick up everything and there's nothing you can do here. So, I mean, Tal played amazing here. It's a beautiful game. This was round number 6 of the Candidates 1959. And in the next videos, we will see how Fischer continues his journey. If you liked, please subscribe, like, or comment, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.